All right, everybody. After filming the last video, I quickly realized that I don't have anything to attach the front wheel to, so I can attach it to the bike. So next step is going to have to be the fork and the headset. In order to install the fork, you're going to need all of the headset components. We'll go over all those specifically later, including the stack of spacers, the star nut, and your stem. Tool-wise, you're going to need 4mm, 5mm Allen wrenches, whatever sizes your stem needs. Typically that's 4 and 5mm, but yours may be a little bit different. You're going to need a nut setter. This is what helps install that star nut in the fork. You can improvise something like this using an old stem to keep it aligned and stem cap and just hammer it in, but I have to have access to one of these. You're also going to need a hammer. It doesn't have to be a soft hammer, really any hammer will do. This is a cheap one from Harbor Freight. And in order to press the crown race on, you're going to need a crown race installation tool. I don't have one of those, so I'm going to make do with a block of wood. The reason I'm using wood is because it is a lot softer than the metal, and it won't damage that crown race as we hammer it on. You could also use a PVC that's just a hair larger than the lower diameter, but this is what I have. And because the steer tube comes at the stock length, not at the bike, the length that's meant for this bike, you're going to need some sort of saw. Now, I have one of these, but it may be a little bit overkill. I'm pretty good with keeping the cut straight. But for the purpose of this video, I think we will go ahead and just use one of these little guides that Park Tool makes, clamp it in the vise, and then just use a standard hacksaw, and that'll be just fine. So, let's get started. Now first, I want to talk just a little bit about what makes up a headset. We're going to start here at the very, very bottom. This is the part that attaches to the fork. They call it the crown race. And what this does is it gives a really good spot for the lower bearing to sit in. Now, if you look at the lower bearing, you see there is a taper here on the outside, and then on the inside there's a taper on the opposite end. This taper here on the inside fits perfectly on this crown race, and then the taper here is going to fit into the cups that press into the frame. Now, on my particular bike, the cups are built into the frame. They're integrated, so they don't come out. So they're already going to be in there. So when I put this on the bike, I want to make sure that I install this with the bearing race facing up on the fork, and that I install this with the outside taper facing up towards the frame. And then here, you've got much of the same thing that goes on the top. You see this is a much smaller bearing because I have a tapered headset. But here I've got my outer taper right here, and I've got my inner taper right here. And the inner taper matches very, very well with this little split expansion spacer, just like that. And this is going to go on the top of the fork, and that tapered outer portion is going to go in towards the bike. On top of that, you've got your headset spacers, and then you have your stem, and then you have the top cap that goes through the stem and threads into this star nut. And this star nut, we have to press into the frame, and this is going to give us something to help squeeze the whole system together so that it preloads the whole system. So let's get started with the crown race. All right, so we want to be careful that we don't damage this seal. Some of them have seals, some of them don't have seals. This one does, and we just want to slide that on there, push it on as far as we can by hand, which in this case is not that far. And then I'm going to take my wooden dowel here and just give it a little tap, alternating locations, so that we can get it on there nice and straight. And as you can see, it is fully seated all the way at the bottom. It cannot go down any farther. So that part's done. Now that we have installed the crown race on our fork, it's time to dry fit the fork onto the bike so that we can see how much of this steer tube needs to be cut off for this particular size frame. In order to do that, we don't need to necessarily install with grease just yet. We just need to install the bearings dry. That's why they call it a dry fit. So we're going to go ahead and install that lower bearing on this crown race, like so. Push it straight up into the frame, all the way. And then we're going to put them in the order of the upper bearing first. Remember, this tapered edge goes down. We're going to put this seal on here. And sometimes you will have a seal and a compression washer. This particular one is a Cane Creek 40, and it is built in, so there's no need to put them on separately. You have to put those on. Now we're going to put our spacers on. I always go for all the spacers that come with it. If you know you want a racier position, you can always take fewer spacers, or you can put more spacers. It's really up to personal preference and bike fit. Then we'll put the stem on. The stem cap obviously can't go on just yet because we haven't put the star nut in, and we can't put the star nut in until we cut the excess off of this. So if we look here, you can see the whole stack consists of all the bearings, the spacers, the stem, and everything. And what we need to do is we need to scribe a little line right here at the top of the stem. And then we disassemble everything, and I've got my little line right here, and then we can cut it. Before we cut this steer tube, I want to show you what a fully assembled headset steer tube looks like. So if you look closely, you can see the top of our stem is here, and our steer tube stops right before it. The whole purpose of this system is for the top cap to pull down on the stem and pull up on the fork. So because we need there to be a little bit of space there to tighten up, what we're going to do is we're going to take our line and we're going to scribe a line about 2 millimeters below that. If it's a little bit more than that, maybe 4 millimeters, you could probably get away with it. You could probably even get away with taking one of the small spacers out and measuring with that spacer and just cutting on that line. But we're just going to make a new scribe line. Next up, it's time to install the star nut. Now I have this awesome little tool here that you just thread the star nut in like so. Just tighten it all the way down. And then place the tool on here. It keeps it nice and straight. And you just hammer it all the way in until it stops. Unscrew it. Now your star nut's installed. Alright, last piece of the puzzle is installing the headset and everything on the bike now that we have the fork prepared. First you want to use some sort of grease. I like to use the Polylube 1000 grease from Park Tool, the PPL1. That's the green stuff. But really any kind of grease that is made for lubricating will do just fine. The main purpose of this is not necessarily to lubricate everything because the bearings themselves are already plenty lubricated. Part of the reason we're putting grease on these races is to help prevent water from getting in and washing out all the grease that is in the actual bearings. So we put plenty of grease where the bearings contact on the inside of the frame. We're also going to put some grease right here. And this grease, like I said, is mostly just to keep water out. We also want to put grease on this right inside here. And it'll help keep it nice and sealed up from all the elements. Alright, so we take our fork, we put our first bearing on there, the same orientation we did before, and then we insert the fork into the frame. We put our upper bearing in there, the same way, again, that we did on our dry fit. We put our seals and our cap here. Now we're going to put our spacers on, and I like to use all 4 of them, but you could easily move your spacers around and you could change the stack height. And now we thread our top cap . There we go. Alright, now as you can see, we've got our bike assembled enough to make it a rolling frame. It's going to make it a lot easier to store in my house in between videos. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you learned something, and if you like the video, like it. If you subscribe, then you can see more of this build as we progress, and thanks for watching.